Today on Studio Dad, a friend of mine sent me a message asking about creating depth and space in mixes and how one begins to start learning how to do that better. And there's a lot you can do with filtering and reverb and panning and level adjustment. I never recommend widener plugins because they all have terrible phase response and destroy your mono compatibility. But what you know about those things so far is probably good. Whatever you know about it is probably appropriate for where you're at. The thing I said to my friend was, the real next level code cracking is going back to microphones and what microphones you use and where you put them. The main takeaway, if you're not going to watch the whole video, is that I don't choose microphones based on what sounds good on the source. I choose microphones based on where I want that source to be in the mix. It's a twist of thinking that I think actually explains some of the shorthand that experienced engineers use to say like, oh, this sounds good on that, or this sounds good on that. Like I always tell people 57 sound great on background vocals. Why do I say that? It's because a 57, maybe 6 inches away from a person singing a background vocal will sit really nicely in the mix against the person singing on a large diaphragm condenser for the lead vocal. It just works really great. Thinking about that more, it's like, oh, that's kind of why a lot of rock vocals sound great on 57s, because it puts the singer in the space of the band. Almost everything sounds close when you're very close. But as you back the mic off, you get a lot of difference between different types of microphones, both just topology-wise and even individual mics, that really affects where they're trying to sit in the mix. And if you can go back to that engineering stage of making a record and engineer the sound you want, not just by flattering the source, but by putting the source in the space that you want to put it in, everything that you're doing with reverb and EQ and panning and stuff will continue to be effective, but it will be more effective. So you'll notice that I almost always back the guitar amp mics off a little of the amp a little bit. One of the reasons is because I rarely want the guitars to sound like they're right here. I want the guitars to sound like they're in a little bit of space. Rather than just doing it with reverb, I just back the mic off. I almost never close mic tambourines. I always use a really nice large diaphragm mic for the drum overhead and get it as close as I can because I want that mic to sound like it's present. I like drums up in the mix a little bit. So being able to get that drum set to sound like it's right here, but as a whole kit, without saying like, oh, the snare drum is right here, because I don't really like close miking snare drums. The snare drum is right here, but like the kit is in some kind of nether space. It's also why I try to put as few microphones on things as possible. I'm not the kind of person who's going to put a close mic and a room mic on something and then blend them. I'm going to try to find the correct distance for the sound I want in the mix. It can be a little scary to commit to this stuff at first, but it teaches you about it very, very fast. If you have to go to mix enough times, with mics that are not exactly where you wanted them to be, you get a little fussier about putting them in the exact right spot and listening. And I think that's really good practice. When you listen to like Lanois records, like I'm thinking mainly of the Shine record, but all his solo records are really good. There's just an incredible amount of depth and space in the record, and you're trying to figure out why, because it can't just be reverb and EQ. You go to studios sometimes and you'll see people have weird microphones on things, or like the little Grundig stereo set that's popular for stereo guitar amps. Why is it popular? What do we mean when we say it sounds good on that source? We mean that it puts them in a nice space. When you're backing the mic off something, backing a 57 off a guitar amp versus backing like a 451 or a 414 off of a guitar amp changes a lot about it. if you take a dynamic mic and back it off of a guitar amp, the sound gets a little smaller and a little farther away, but it doesn't necessarily get that much more ambient. Condenser mics, if you back them off the source, you'll hear a lot of the ambience, and a lot of the ambience will come up, especially when you compress it. So learning to hear what sound you mean when you say, oh, I want these guitar tracks to sit back a little bit, or these guitar tracks to sit over here. It's one of the reasons why, like, when miking, I try to have a rough mix idea in mind so that I can EQ and pan and move mics around based on where I want it to be in the mix. If I think these guitars should be panned to create a stereo effect, I'll want to have two mics and pan them and listen to it in stereo, as opposed to like stereoizing it later. It's also why I don't always like to do doubles of guitars and then, oh, double, blam, blam. If we're going to do that, I like to know ahead of time so that I can put the mic all the way over here and listen to it in the context of the mix. I can imagine the one on the other side. Listen to it in the context of the mix to make sure that I'm engineering it appropriately for what it's going to sound like when it's over there coming out of one speaker. Things sound differently coming out of one speaker versus two because of just how the phantom center channel affects your brain. So if something's going to be hard panned, it's also handy to know ahead of time. But anyway, the short answer is, because this is what, seven minutes long. We'll see if we can cut this down a little bit. The short answer is listen to what different mics do to the mix aspect of something and choose mics based on mixing.